Now we can create the routes for our two authentication pages. We can do that by creating two new folders in the app folder. First one will be called sign-in, and the second one will be called sign-up. Within both of these, we'll create a new page.tsx, within which I'll run RAFCE, and I'll rename it to sign in. I'll repeat the same thing for sign up by creating a new page.tsx, running RAFCE, and renaming it to sign up. There we go. So now we have two new routes. There are two things happening now. Even if you head over to /sign in, you won't be able to see the route name because it's going below the navbar. And the second thing is that we don't even want to see a navbar on the authentication pages. And how do I know that? Because it's shown in the design. If you head over all the way to the right side of the design, you'll see our authentication pages, specifically these two, the create your account and the sign in. What a great yet simple design. But as you can see, even though all the other pages have the navbar, our auth pages are completely empty. They don't have it. So what do you think? How can we make sure that the navbar shows in all of the other pages besides the auth pages? We can do it by using the concept known as route groups. Route groups allow you to nest additional folders without mapping them to URL paths. And what they allow you to do is to organize your routes into more groups based on section, intent, or theme. And more importantly, they enable you to nest different layouts, allowing you to have a completely different layout for a different route group. The way in which you create them is by simply wrapping a folder in parentheses. So let's give it a shot by creating a new folder in the app folder, and I'll name it parentheses auth. Now I'll move both the sign in route and the sign up route into the auth folder. Now I'll create a second route group by creating a new folder, and I'll call it root, the root of our application. And in there, I'll put our existing page.tsx. Now, as I've just told you, each route groups allows us to have its own layout. So let's create two new layouts. I'll create a new file in the auth folder called layout.tsx, and I'll create another one in the root route group, and I'll call it layout.tsx. It has to be called that way to follow a convention. Now we can move the navbar import from the general layout right here, which contains all of the general information about our app, which we want to show both in the auth routes and the root routes, but we don't want to show the navbar. So let's copy it from here, or rather remove it from here, and then move it over to our root layout by creating a new layout. We can do that by running RAFCE. We can name this root layout. Every layout has to get children as a prop, and it'll be of a type. Children is a React node, which we can import from React. Then we can return everything in a main element. We can render the navbar right here at the top, and right below it, we can render all the children. Let's copy this entire layout and also put it in the auth layout, but this time we will remove the navbar and just keep the children right here. And in the auth layout, make sure to rename it from root layout to auth layout. If you do that, you'll notice that now we don't have a name mismatch and no error is happening. So just to recap, we now have our app, which contains two different route groups. Outside of those route groups, we have a layout which contains all the general information about our application that we want to show and share with all the route groups, both auth and root. For example, theme provider. We want to make sure that our theme persists on both auth and home pages. Then within the root route, we have a page.tsx, which is going to act as our home page. We can see it by going to localhost 3000, or rather we can't because it's hidden behind the navbar, but we know that it's there. Now, why is the navbar showing here? Because root is referring to the layout within the root where we do in fact render a navbar. But now, if you manually switch over to something like sign-in, you'll see that there is no navbar. There's just the sign-in page. Why is that? Well, because the layout right here doesn't contain the navbar. The only thing it does contain is the sign-in page. I hope this makes sense. Essentially, we just use the route groups to group and organize our code. Another thing I want to mention is that route groups are not reflected in the URL. So to get to the sign-in, you don't have to say /auth/sign-in as you usually would with a normal folder. That's exactly why we use the route groups using the parentheses, so we can just head over to sign in and the page will automatically be there. Pretty cool, right? You just created your auth routes for this application and learned a bit more about implementing route groups in Next.js in practice. Great work.